We need to keep a close eye on the people who occupy a special place in our hearts. It is often the people you love that lead you to up the path of good or down the path of bad. We also need to be wary of the money inside our pockets. We need to make sure our earnings are clean. Our Prophet Muhammad says, "The world is sweet and has an alluring view, but Allah gives it to you only to see how you will behave. So beware." The nature of the people we love and the money we make is what molds our hearts, as well as our actions. Money has a secret. It goes back to where it comes from. Clean money heads for good, while dirty cash becomes capital for evil. Money's fate determines a person's own. People like to believe they hold sway over their money and can spend it on whatever they wish. But money really ends up where it deserves, depending on how it was made. And it drags the person with it. It is money that calls the shots, not the person who has it. Money is like a snake. It comes out of the same hole it goes into. The dirty cash in the wallet finds a way to corrupt one's actions. Worse still, it slithers inside and poisons the heart. It is therefore crucial where money comes from and how it is spent. If we want to find spiritual and material peace, we have to make a clean living. Shame on those who give less than due. When they take a measure from people, they take in full. But if they give by measure or by weight, they cheat. Don't they think that they will be resurrected for a tremendous day? The day when mankind will stand before the Lord of the worlds. Al-Mutaffifin 1-6. There's a nice story about this. Baldano one day asks Caliph Harun Rashid for a job, and the Caliph gives him the duty of inspecting the marketplace. Balal quickly gets down to work. First, he walks inside a bakery and weighs a few loaves of bread on the scale. It turns out they all weigh less than they should. He asks the baker, "Are you happy with life? Can you get by? Can you put bread on the table?" The baker shrugs his shoulders. He has nothing in life that he is happy about. Balal says nothing and walks out. He goes to another bakery and again weighs a few loaves of bread. But this time, they all weigh more than they should. Balal asks the baker the same questions. The baker responds with a warm smile. Balal then heads straight to Harun Rashid and asks him for a different job. "What? You've had enough already?" the Caliph retorts. "Hardly," Balal responds. "But it appears that the market already has an inspector. He has come in before me to weigh each loaf and every conscience. And he already has people paying their dues. So, the first condition of material and spiritual comfort is to make an honest living. Clean or halal food inspires and increases spiritual energy. But food that has been put on the table through illicit, haram, or doubtful means makes one lazy, forgetful, and blocks sensibility. It casts a curtain on the heart." Abulkader Gailani says, "Eating what is haram kills the heart, while eating what is halal revives it. There are morsels that occupy you with the world, and there are morsels that engage you with the hereafter. A halal morsel makes you seek your Lord." It is for that reason that Ali Ramatani once recounted the Prophet's wisdom. Deeds of worship are 10 parts. 9 of them have to do with desiring an honest living. The rest of the deeds make up just 1 part, before adding, "A person who does not consume what is halal cannot find the power within himself to obey God. He always tends to rebel and listen to the whines of his ego. But a person who consumes what is halal cannot find the power within him to rebel." In other words, what makes a person righteous is an honest earning. It was for that reason that Sufyan-i-Thawri told a man who asked him about the benefits of offering prayer at a mosque on the first row to worry about where you stand in your earnings, then stand to pray wherever you wish. And on another occasion, he said, "A person's piety is only as much as the purity of his earnings." Allah likes to see his servants tired from chasing an honest earning. Suyuti, Jamiu Sagar, 165. But regrettably, today's capitalist mentality has eroded spiritual values so much that even the religious have embraced practices that have no place in Islam. Many people, who have offered pilgrimage and in fact pray regularly, tell themselves that they have got to earn more to spend in the way of the good. But this is a blunder of the blindest kind. They are really living in a mishmash of right and wrong without even being aware. To accept the wrong as right is far worse than to actually do it. It comes with the risk of dragging a person outside of Islam. The real danger of trying to justify un-Islamic practices is that it takes the person beyond wrong action to wrong belief. Others who make dubious earnings try to console themselves by saying that capitalism has today's commercial life by the throat, and there is no other way than to play the game of trade by its rules. But Islam does not force anyone to do trade to make a living. This is more a case of people allowing their greed to make excuses for un-Islamic dealings. An honest dollar is better than a suspicious thousand. Dirty money corrupts the heart, whereas a clean dollar expands it. It holds out a ladder towards spiritual heights and sets the scene for material comfort. Rumi says, "Inspiration left me at dawn and I strayed away, knew that a few doubtful morsels had entered my body. Knowledge and wisdom are born out of clean food. So are love and compassion. If a morsel causes ignorance, know that it is doubtful, or worse." It is always the case that people who fail to live the way they believe start to believe in the way they live. This usually begins when they reluctantly engage in an un-Islamic transaction, thinking it is necessary. But in time, they slowly begin to justify it. That is when it starts to eat away at their faith. Worse still, a dishonest money can in fact totally destroy faith. It is therefore vital for people in business to make sure their earnings are clean right from the beginning. The mentality of "this is the way things are done." Explicit advertisements, hiring females to attract customers with their charm rather than their skills, are just a couple of the worst mistakes of today's commercial life. Because greed overshadows the worries of the afterlife, the ego blinds one to the immorality of it all and instead offers excuses like, "In this day and age, this is the way things are done." Often, it also comes with the excuse that they are doing it only so they can earn more and to give more in charity. But they are brazenly overstepping the fine line between right and wrong and ultimately fooling themselves. Capitalism is where corporate investments transform societies for the worse. And since it is a system that inflates the ego, not only does it have no room for spirituality, it cripples it. Capitalism has no interest in teaching moral responsibilities. It dries up tears and wipes out compassion. It encourages people to do all they can for a few dollars and commands them to turn a blind eye on the exploited billions whose lives are ruined by their greed. The capitalist ideology uses various methods of propaganda, advertising campaigns, and fashion trends that seduce the mind, as well as the heart, in order to promote an economy of waste. It does, after all, receive its energy from excess consumerism. So, we first need to abstain from unnecessary spending. It only shores up the economy of waste and leads to a surge in luxury that ends up drowning society. Credit cards do nothing more than to increase extravagant spending. They are capitalist traps. Needs can never be an excuse. They are such big traps that they even draw in the poor, just to allow the rich to get richer. And the people to blame here are the foolish and self-seeking rich, who choose extravagance over modesty and flaunt their wealth so flagrantly that the poor themselves end up pushing their own financial limits just to imitate them because they are so tempted by what they see. And do not consume one another's wealth unjustly or bribe rulers so that they may help you embezzle what belongs to the people, when you well know that it is unlawful. Al-Baqarah 188. Modesty is one of the major commands of Islam. So are alms and charity, which aim to bridge the divide between the rich and the poor. And they never disappear from society without leaving a trail of victims in their wake. Many poor but gullible people, who are fooled by the dazzle of advertisements and billboards, are then pushed to resort to shady lifestyles and means to support themselves. Many a poor young girl's world is turned upside down by fancy yet devious ads that tell her to wear so and so clothes or act in so and so manner, so that she becomes more popular and accepted by society. The girl then starts to hanker after a lifestyle she can never afford. But the more that ideal slips away from her, the greedier and more desperate she becomes. That desperation leads her to pursue that dream on the wrong side of the boardwalk. And sadly, she often ends up being used and thrown aside. Hazrat Umar says, "The most ignorant are those who sell their afterlives for another person's ambitions." To find inner peace, we must accept our situations, make do with what we have, and allow that feeling to embrace our hearts. Our Prophet says, "Allah loves one who is pious, rich at heart, and keeps to himself his work and prayer, salat." Muslim, Zud 11. The rubble of humanity. Mass culture has mobilized television and the internet to launch a global invasion. And through them, it has been able to numb souls, blind spiritual sensitivities, and help sustain capitalism's economy of waste. Capitalism has reduced mankind to rubble. Tears are now a thing of the past, and souls have all but lost their mercy. Worse still, capitalism has put a lock on the doors of pharmacies that could offer some cure. Capitalism has no room for the heart. Neither do socialism and communism. They only differ in who they ascribe wealth to. One points to the individual and the other two to society. But because they are all driven by opportunism and exploitation, they wind up being the same. They swallow the individual up. The individual exists only for the system. But in Islam, wealth belongs to Allah, not man. Man's part can perhaps be explained through to a common practice today called time-sharing, which is where one is given use of a property only for a certain period of time. Once that time is up, he gives it back. So in Islam, it is absurd to exploit others, infringe on their rights, and violate the divine boundaries. Just for the sake of a few dollars, one will inevitably end up waving goodbye to anyway. Islamic economics begins by solving real human problems, and it obliges us to share our wealth with others, especially with those in need. The Quran states, "And in their properties is a share for the needy and the deprived." Ad-Dariyat 19. This not only teaches one the right way to spend money, it also binds the hearts of people together. Our Prophet says, "Two angels descend on earth every morning. One prays, 'Lord, give more wealth to the charitable,' while the other prays, 'Lord, destroy the wealth of the stingy.'" Bukhari, Zakat 27, Muslim, Zakat 57. Islam has bestowed an order to commerce, as it has done to all aspects of life. It has marked the boundaries of right and wrong. It has ordered mercy and compassion and has entrusted the poor in the care of the rich. It has blended earnings with justice. Capitalism only worries about its profit. Humans are nothing but cogs in its economic wheel. That is why it exploits without mercy and leaves nothing standing in its way. But Islam tells people to let their conscience be the judge and ask, "Where and how have I made this money? And for who and how will I spend it?" The three principles of Islam. Putting money to good use is an art. To learn that art, one must make an honest earning, abstain from wasting it, and from being tight-fisted. Wastefulness is to flaunt wealth only to hide an inferiority complex. And stinginess is to hoard money due to fear of poverty, which itself is a devil's trick. It is a weakness caused by being cowardly and lacking trust in God. At bottom, both wastefulness and stinginess are rebellions against God, who is the true owner of wealth. A Muslim must correct those flaws by giving charity as much as his pocket and faith allow. He must strive to make a clean living, but only to donate. The Quran makes so great a case of this that it mentions charity more than 200 times. So does our Prophet, when he says the hand that gives is superior to the hand that receives. Three types of people are distant from God: those who flee doing good things for fear of losing their comfort, those who use being sensitive as an excuse to turn a blind eye on those who are suffering, those who stand with the oppressors and the ignorant. A true Muslim also has his conscience to remind him each morning, God has just opened for you another page from the book of life. How much will you spare the upcoming hours for yourself, and how much for people around you? You have what many others do not. That is God's way of telling you that you are responsible for them. Allah says, "Seek the afterlife through what Allah has given you, but do not forget your share of the world. Do good as Allah has done good to you, and do not desire corruption in the land, for Allah does not like corruptors." Al-Qasis 77. The heart of a true Muslim is filled with mercy and feels responsible for the needs of all beings, including animals. Rumi best describes this state of mind when he says, "Shams taught me that, if that there is one person on earth feels cold, you do not have the right to keep yourself warm. And knowing that there is always a person out there somewhere who feels cold, I have forgotten the feeling of warmth." What the great Shams taught Rumi was to feel the shiver of others left out in the cold. It is easy to keep warm, you just have to wear more clothes. But keeping the conscience warm requires the heart to get closer to Allah through charity. Rumi teaches us the approach we should have towards the sufferings of all creatures on earth. A scene of disaster must first send shivers down the heart, not the spine. It is only then that the heart warms up to find peace. In short, a Muslim's heart should aim for the purity that God is pleased with, through an Islamic character that God will testify to, for the purpose of becoming a person that all humans, plants and animals can benefit from. Ismail Atta says, "Be a shade in the sun, a coat in the snow, and bread in the famine. Your world turns to paradise when you give charity with the hand, tongue, and heart. Forgive others, and teach those who do not know." Abu Dhar speaks wisdom. Any given asset has three shareholders. The first is you, owner. The second is fate, which never tells you whether the asset will bring you good or bad, whether it will breathe life into you or destroy you. The third is your inheritor. He waits for you to go underground, the sooner the better. When Islam meets capitalism. Capitalism was born in and grew out of mostly Christian societies. Christianity says it is enough for you to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. It tells people to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. It has no aim of regulating social and economic life. And therefore, what it does teach is not socially binding. It tells people to have mercy, but each person can interpret mercy differently. An unjust employer can well claim he has mercy based on his warped understanding of what mercy is. It is therefore natural for capitalism to grow unrestrained in societies that put up no moral obstacles in front of it. But Islam comes with social and economic values. And provided that Muslims abide by these, there is no way a merciless economy can besiege them. But as the saying goes, nature abhors a vacuum. And once Muslims stop fulfilling their social and economic duties, other systems inevitably are on the scene to fill that void. Imam Shafi'i says, "Evil invades a heart that is not filled with the good." Even in the tulip age. Question, but there is also another thing to consider. Even in societies in which Islam was the dominant force, say for example during the Ottoman tulip age, Muslims generally tended to lose their footing whenever money slipped into their pockets. The same could be said about a number of periods before that. And when you look at it today, Islam does exist in society, but it is hardly the dominant force anymore. Its values do not find expression in a governing system. The dominant force, both at home and abroad, is capitalism. So, how are we supposed to put up a resistance? The money that made a person lose his footing back in the day has now developed into a system which transforms entire societies. How long could we possibly hold out? How can one protect himself against an overbearing system? Does he have a case to argue? We should perhaps begin there. Answer: life is a trial, and all societies have faced challenges. The Quran, in fact, states, "Do the people think that they will be left to say, 'We believe,' and not be tried?" Al-Ankabut 2. And our Prophet says, "The pleasures of life are the pains of the afterlife, and the pains of life are the pleasures of the afterlife." Hakim, Mustadrak 4, page 345. If life brought no challenges, there would have been no reason to reward people for good action. Only angels face no obstacles on their road to serve God. But God has created both man and jinn for trial. And as part of it, they are exposed to good influences and bad, which could be the whispers of the ego from within or the traps of the world from without. The greatness of a victory is measured by the hardships overcome to get there. Even a father promises to reward a child who does her homework. And in this trial of life, Allah promises to reward those who find a way to serve Him by jumping the hurdles put up by the ego and the devil, with entry to paradise and everlasting peace in His presence and under His gaze. That also includes peace in this life. Life is a trial, and that is the nature of it. So, there will always be challenges. That is the way it was in the past. Those challenges are perhaps a little more in our times, but essentially, they are no different. We could even hope that the eternal rewards of today's Muslims will be more, in light of the fact that they are perhaps faced with a lot more hurdles. But the toughness of today's conditions cannot be an excuse. Turning to God is valuable only because one overcomes many obstacles to make that turn. Therefore, a smart Muslim works to knock these barriers over rather than throw in the towel. But he can only do so if he has taqwa. Taqwa is to clean the ego of desires, develop spiritual capabilities, and to become aware of being constantly watched by divine cameras. A Muslim must wear taqwa like an armor to protect himself from the tribulations of the final hour, which is drawing closer by the day. And taqwa needs to appear most vividly in earning and spending money. The lovers of religion have not left the world, but the lovers of the world have left religion. Kalam-i-Kabar. It could even be said that this is the most urgent issue of our times because of how widespread and accepted un-Islamic commercial practices have become. A Muslim who has taqwa believes that wealth is a matter of fate, and that belief helps him to be content with what he has. Wealth does indeed depend on fate. You will see a man with no business experience whatsoever, but he has land, whose value suddenly quadruples due to factors beyond of his control. He becomes rich overnight and begins to boast of his so-called business genius. Then you see another who has wits, foresight, and knowledge of how economy works, but he just cannot seem to get the ship sailing. There are even sayings which indicate that people are already aware that wealth is a matter of fate. Sayings like, anything he touches turns to gold, or anything he touches turns to dust. The Quran says, and as for man, when his Lord is generous to him and favors him, he says, my Lord has blessed me. But when he tries him and restricts his provision, he says, my Lord has demeaned me. Al-Far 15-16. Your Lord gives to whom he wills and withholds it from whom he wills. He is knowing and seeing over his servants. Al-Isra 30. Plus, it is impossible to tell whether wealth will be good or bad for the person. Only Allah can tell. For that reason, a mature Muslim never feels overly happy about the money he makes or overly sad about the money he loses. Under all circumstances, he keeps his heart content with God's will. For he knows that earning God's love first requires him to be content with what he has and have complete trust in Allah. He keeps thoughts like, why has God given that to so-and-so person and not me, out of his mind. Whenever life throws its bittersweet surprises at him, he clutches on to his weapon of patience. He always remembers the Prophet's wisdom that the true life is the afterlife. To be happy with God's will when things are well, but then to complain when things start going bad is incompatible with submission to Allah. Yet, without spiritual maturity, nearly every single person will fall into this trap. It is only after one purifies his soul that he becomes truly content, stops whining, and submits completely to what may come from the Lord, even when it may appear to be bad. It is these people that the Quran speaks so highly of when it says, to the righteous it will be said, O reassured soul, return to your Lord, well pleased and pleasing to him. Enter among my righteous servants, and enter my paradise. Al-Far 27-30. Our Prophet says, may the slaves of silver and gold, of clothes that carry vanity and conceit, perish. The greedy is happy only when he receives, but rebels the moment he does not. Bukhari, Rikak 10, Jihad 70, Ibn Majah, Zud 8. Is being weak an excuse? Question. Today, when the capitalist system imposes its own conditions on life, could people resort to the excuse of what the Quran mentions as weakened Muslims? That is unthinkable. The Prophet's companions were far from rich. It was in fact the pagan and non-Muslims trying to destroy them who were. Still, the companions never resorted to usury and dirty cash with the excuse it would give them power to fight against them. The thought did not even cross their minds. They just kept persevering, knowing that power lies exclusively in the hands of God, and he gives it to whoever he wishes. And in the end, they won. Muslims in fact seized their biggest lands during the age of the companions. This shows that spirit always subdues matter. The Quran declares, how many a small group has overcome a large group by the permission of Allah, and Allah is with the patient. Al-Baqarah 249. Again, going by that passage from Al-Fatiha which we so often read, it is you we worship and you we ask for help. God helps people only to the extent they submit to him. Man needs guidance. It is for that reason that prophets were sent to shine a light on societies in their darkest hours. And the darkest of all times was when Prophet Muhammad graced the earth. The economic conditions back then were actually far worse than those imposed by capitalism today. They had all but destroyed all things humane, crushed the moral compass, and led to a yawning gap between the rich and the poor. So, just how did our Prophet educate a society worse than capitalists? How did he manage to turn them into people whose quality is unmatched in history? How did he set so many crooked men straight? How did he tame men who snatched their own daughters away from their crying mothers and buried them with their own bare hands to cry? How was he able to pour mercy into their hearts? We need to think about that, not come up with excuses. Many systems like capitalism have come in the past, but they have also gone. Indeed, those who recite the Book of Allah, offer prayer, and donate secretly and openly out of what we have provided them, can expect an endless profit. He will give them their rewards in full and increase his bounty for them. Indeed, he is forgiving and appreciative. Al-Fatir 29-30. Taqwa against the system. Question: it is often said that the strength of the established system or the status quo is far greater than man, and there is no way of putting up a resistance. How can man protect himself from the effects of an all-encompassing system? Answer: only through taqwa. The love and fear of Allah inside the heart is a Muslim's greatest armor. Taqwa is the only fence he has to keep illicit and doubtful things out of his life. A Muslim cannot be so silly as to let passing joys destroy his eternity, especially knowing that once his time is up, they will be taken away from him anyway. A Muslim would rather set himself back financially than compromise divine laws for passing joys. In the words of Zia Pasha, keep loyal even when in duress and pain, and if they all desert you, God will remain. There might be times when a Muslim is forced to take a backward step to protect the values God has taught him. But even if he ends up losing a lot of money because of it, he will rest content, knowing that he will have dug up far more splendid treasures in paradise. We should bear in mind that Allah does not order us to get rich. He rather commands us to live within the bounds, make an honest living, and give away as good as we get. So, whatever the circumstances may be, it is essential that we build our lives on what is right. We should not try and force our way through divine borders, or our fates for that matter. We need to make an honest dollar and donate as much as we possibly can. We cannot afford to lay waste to our inner peace by chasing luxury. We cannot let go of our chances at a peace of heart. Islam has the spiritual riches our hearts need. True wealth rests in the heart and the heart alone. Does wealth corrupt Muslims? Question: then, how should address the criticisms, from both the inside and out, that wealth has flattened all values, normalized all dealings, and infected Muslims with the virus of capitalism? Answer: the best way to respond to that would be to refer to the times when Islam was properly understood and lived. Periods that instantly spring to mind are the 2.5 years when Omar ibn Abdulaziz was caliph and the first third of the Ottomans. That was when a delicate sense of taqwa kept people from drowning in the riches of the world and from holding a tight grip on their money. They were in fact times when they could hardly find a person poor enough to donate to. But the last 3 centuries of the Ottomans offer a contrasting example. It shows that once excitements wane and the love of the world creeps into hearts, Allah takes his blessings away. God has given Muslims the task of being his witnesses on earth, ingesting the divine truths into their own hearts and the hearts of others, and serving to elevate Islam. Muslims have the job of representing and spreading the truth simply through the way they live. Properly understanding and fulfilling this duty leaves no room for social or economic crises. In a community of this kind, even a natural disaster does not lead to instability and turmoil. Eli Kaduri recounts an incident in one of his books on British politics in the Middle East during the final years of the Ottomans. It is said that a devastating drought breaks out in eastern Anatolia towards the end of the 19th century, and the British send a spy to the area to see whether they could use the drought to incite a rebellion. The spy observes the situation and pens a report with a remarkable conclusion. There is drought here, but no hunger, solely because people are always looking out for one another. That prevents drought from turning into famine. And in the current circumstances, using drought to incite a rebellion is impossible. The most delicious fruit of faith is mercy. And mercy best shows when you give what you have to those who do not. Traveler Aubrey de la Motre makes a similar observation. In the Ottoman lands, even if one's house burns to ashes and the entire family lose all their belongings, you do not see weeping women and crying children as you do in other societies. You just see a look in their eyes that shows a total trust in the will of God. And they also have their neighbors to help them rebuild their home from scratch. So does Cornelis de Bruyne. It is undeniable that Turks relish the opportunity to donate and build even more charitable institutions than Christians. And that is the major reason as to why you see almost no beggars in Ottoman lands. These are just a few examples from the Ottomans. And if we go further back to look at the Prophet's companions, which the Ottomans took as their model, we cannot see any of them display even a single sign of depression, even though they had to endure great poverty. But despite all the luxury and comfort we have today, psychological and psychiatric illnesses have become so commonplace. That is because greed has turned to savagery and ambition has turned men to monsters. As a result, sharing has become outdated and generosity has been forgotten. Hazrat Ali says, "There are two blessings and I am not entirely sure which one I like more. The first is for someone to genuinely ask for my help, hoping that I will take care of his need. The second is for Allah to take care of his need, or at least make it easier for him, through me. I prefer easing a Muslim's worries to a world of silver and gold." Ali al-Mataki, 6, 598 for 17049. The late Nureddin Topku, who taught us at high school, would sometimes ask, "Who is happier? The people of today or the people of yesterday?" He would then go on to explain, point by point, how the people of yesterday had an inner peace that people today have lost because of their lack of empathy. Whatever the times may be, a person hoping to find inner peace must put the divine teachings of Islam to practice in his everyday life. Once ambitions harden the heart and cast aside worries of the afterlife, man becomes a bully who exploits the loopholes of law without any concern for justice and morals. A quick look around will show you that, sadly, that is the case. How could the tyranny and exploitation of our age, which take place only to enlarge the bank accounts of a handful of people, be reconciled with anything humane? Bombs dropped from the sky destroy everything indiscriminately and without mercy: women and children, the ill and old, animals and plants. What kind of a civilization do they expect to build using money dyed with the blood of innocent beings? Capitalism found a breathing space away from spiritual values, and it enslaves humans by placing money and power as idols on their altar. Hazrat Abu Bakr says, "Corruption is inescapable when faith is confined between the walls of mosques, wealth to the pockets of the stingy, weapons to the hands of the coward, and decisions to the judgment of the weak." Taking an Islamic stand against capitalism. Question: Capitalism is a global current. It has forced socialism to yield, and with it, the Soviets and China to step aside. And capitalism has hailed that as a victory. It is often said that the only system that could mount a challenge to capitalism is Islam because it comes with a worldview, as well as a system that regulates life. And when you think about it, that is what is needed. On the other hand, there have been upheavals against capitalism, like Occupy Wall Street. In Turkey, we recently had a May Day where an anti-capitalist Muslim group ended up allying itself with the left. Could not Islam offer a systematic objection and alternative to capitalism? Can we, for instance, idealize the stance of Abu Dhar? Answer: we first need to be careful not to try and blend what is false with what is true. It is impossible. On the surface, capitalism and communism may appear to be saying two different things, with one ascribing property to the individual and the other to society. But at bottom, they say the same thing. They both ascribe property to man. This is what Islam objects. It says property neither belongs to the individual nor society. It belongs to Allah. So, Islam is fundamentally different to both, and that is where Islam's beauty and splendor come from. It does not need a fake limb. It is only out of ignorance that one tries to attach man-made systems to it. Rumi illustrates that ignorance wonderfully. He says Allah has created every type of food that a fish needs in the sea, but the fish still covets the bait hanging off the line of a rod. It lunges at a tiny worm without seeing the hook sticking out of it, and snatch the worm, ends up having its own life snatched away. Islam would have been deficient if it had the need to feed off another system. But Islam itself is the greatest system of all. Its source is Allah Himself. Trying to merge Islam with an artificial system would backfire. It would mutate into either one or the other, in this case capitalism or communism. It will lose its magnificence and Muslims, their character and identity. Imam Shafi'i says, being intimate with those who love the world will make you sick. And Ghazali states, closeness with non-Muslims on intellectual matters and time turns to closeness in matters of the heart. And that turns to a disease that eats away one's spirituality to the point of destruction. The Ottomans took over a rundown Istanbul, and there was a need to rebuild it. Leonardo da Vinci wrote to the then Sultan Bayezid II, expressing his interest, but not the Sultan. He did not think twice to reject the offer. He was concerned that da Vinci would bring a foreign architectural style that would not reflect the Muslim spirit. And he declared, "Do not let him through our borders, even if he wanted to fly over our skies on wings. We will rebuild the city with our own artistic style and our own architecture." And that approach would give birth to many a Sinan, a Sheikh Hamdullah, a Karahisari, and others. It essentially paved the way for us to build our own civilization. That attitude reflects how sensitive Islam is to maintain its originality in every aspect of life. Islam needs no prosthetic limb. To think it does betrays an insufficient knowledge of it. The same goes for the historicists, who try and fuse Islam with the prevalent currents of a given time. A Muslim must completely submit to Islam and protect its dignity. He must carefully strive to apply all its principles in economic and social life. Keeping the heart from eroding. It could be said that the historicism you mention is the result of an intellectual flaw. Those who defend it say, so Islamic principles belong to yesteryear, and the times have changed. And they portray capitalism as something that is necessary to the times we are living. Then there are normally fussy Muslims who begin to say, there is nothing I can do about their dubious dealings, and try to reconcile themselves to those practices. What can Muslims do in order not to erode under the landslide of capitalism? We should begin by saying that historicism is completely mistaken. The commands and bans of Islam are custom-made for the unchanging features of human nature. Its rulings are so perfect that they can be applied in all places, at all times. They never go stale or lose their vitality. Islam preserves its brilliance to provide for the needs of all humans. It is deviant to suppose that certain rulings of the Quran are relevant only to a remote place in distant history. It will push one outside of the bounds of Islam. Historicism is to also presume that God is incompetent, even though his knowledge and power are boundless. The truth is that each time societies underwent a structural transformation, God sent them prophets to teach them the right way to go about things in line with the changing needs of the times. Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger, and the rules he taught are able to address the needs of each and every human being to come until the final hour. To assume the opposite would amount to a terrible deceit, where one falsely believes that God lacks the power to do better. That's despite knowing that his eternal knowledge encompasses everything past, present, and future, and no one knows man better than he does, insofar as it was him who created man. Nothing is more absurd than to try and argue with God using the mind that he himself gave. It is best to remind those who fall into such idiocy these words of the Quran. Say, are you trying to teach Allah the religion when Allah knows whatever is in the heavens and on earth, and he is knowing of all things? Al-Hujurat 16. So do you believe in part of the scripture and disbelieve in part? Then what can possibly await them except disgrace in worldly life? And on the day of resurrection, they will be sent back to the severest of punishment. And Allah is not unaware of what you do. Al-Baqarah 85. Our Prophet says, only two types of people deserve to be envied. One who Allah has given the Quran, which he keeps himself occupied with and lives by, day and night. And one who Allah has given wealth, which he spends day and night for the poor. Muslim, Muzaffirun 266, 267. Our Prophet says, the Quran is a divine word that guides a person out of all problems to come until the final hour. It has information about those before you, the situations of those after you, and verdicts on the cases which humans will dispute with one another. It draws a line between the true and the false. It does not speak in vain. Allah destroys the transgressor who abandons it, and if a person looks for a guide beyond it, he will throw him into further deceit. Tirmizi, Fidel Quran, 14/2906. Darimi, Fidel Quran, 11. Now, to return to our discussion, it all comes down to underlining the importance of one thing. Islam does not say, do not worry about how you make your money, just donate a lot. It says, whatever you do, make sure you earn your money the right way. It does not ask a Muslim to do more than he can. It only gives him a task he can handle. You also mentioned the example of Abu Dhar. He may set a standard for some people with similar personalities, but he cannot be considered an example for the broader society. In the Quran, Allah orders Muslims to donate around 200 times. A Muslim has to run companies and factories to do that. Otherwise, how can he? But a Muslim must make a clean earning and keep away from extravagance and stinginess. He must live humbly and donate. He must also walk a fine line when trying to expand his business. He must not veer into illicit avenues. He must not exploit the sweat of his laborers. He must not lower himself by getting attractive women to promote his products in advertisements or on billboards, just so he can make a greater profit. The Quran mentions, in chapter Isra, how the devil becomes man's partner in his wealth and children. Sadly, the devil has a lot of shares in many of today's businesses. Another example is how many builders install shared pools in new housing estates, turning what should be a homely environment into a beach club. And by so doing, they pave the way for the inner destruction of the families who live there. There are also the dodgy types, who produce cheap, low-quality but profitable goods because they do not want to face up to competition. They play with the genetics of crops and livestock and corrupt food with genetically modified additives. They endanger both the spiritual and physical health of human beings just to make more money. That is business completely gone off the rails. It is also sad that some religious people can at times confuse the right and the wrong because they simply have not properly learned Islam's rulings on commercial and economic life. There are also those who know quite well that what they are doing is wrong, but they console themselves with foolish excuses like, it is impossible to make an honest living anymore. What they are really doing is to take the devil's word over God's own. Many Muslims who say they closely observe Islam in their personal lives turn their backs on it when it comes to business. For example, some of them lease their shops to a line of business that clearly violates divine law and damages the morals of society. It is as if they have not even heard of the Prophet's words that a person who leads someone to something good takes the same rewards, and a person who leads someone to something bad incurs the same sins. And what is worse, they can easily consider their money clean when it has been smeared with all sorts of dirt. These are really crimes committed without any moral concern, and that is unfortunate. Yet, the rent that comes from businesses that make their money through things Allah has strictly forbidden cannot be clean. So, Muslims need to take utmost care, even when they are letting others use their properties. They should not lease them out to people who simply pay more. They must pay attention to whether their tenants run a type of business that God consents. That which is impermissible to take is also impermissible to give. Mashallah. That is to say, if it is forbidden to buy, consume, or use something, it is also forbidden to give or sell it. It is sad that the money we make today is openly exposed to these venoms. Muslims need to be really conscious to avoid the dangers awaiting them in commercial life, as if they are tiptoeing around a minefield. Our Prophet says, there will come a time when a person will not care if his earnings are halal or haram. Bukhari, Bu 7.